those projects, I have no doubt. Next slide. The other ways that through the pipeline industry includes FERC regularly turning a blind eye to illegal pollution and damage that's inflicted upon pipeline companies. And so what we see routinely with these pipeline projects existing and new is that during their construction, during their operation, during their maintenance, violations of law are pretty routine. They're pretty regular. And when we have looked back at the history of FERC, we have not found a single instance where FERC itself issued a penalty for those violations, particularly of environmental and community protection laws. We don't even see FERC issuing stop work orders that would require the company to come into compliance with the law to clean up their pollution before they continue on business as usual. FERC just turns a blind eye to this illegal activity. Next slide. Other ways we see FERC's bias playing out is in their stripping the public of the ability to challenge pipeline projects before those projects go into construction under FERC authority or with FERC authorization. And so if you have a pipeline project that's been approved by FERC, that's been given its certificate of public convenience and necessity, and you think that that decision was wrongheaded and that it was actually a violation of law in the approval process, and you want to challenge it, you have to first file a rehearing request. FERC has created this legal loophole where you have to file a rehearing request, and then FERC has to respond to that rehearing request, either granting it or denying it. And until that happens, you can't challenge that decision or that pipeline project in court. What FERC has done is it's created a strategy where it responds to rehearing requests with something called a tolling order. And it says, thank you very much, we'll think about it, we'll let you know. And meanwhile, FERC allows pipeline projects to continue to advance through the approval process and even to advance through construction, all the while not responding to your rehearing request. So you are not entitled to go to court under the Natural Gas Act to challenge their decision, but yet the pipeline company is allowed to continue to advance their project. We have found in the experience of the Delaware Riverkeeper Network most recently, they sat on a rehearing request for between 13 and 14 months. The ramification of this is by the time FERC does respond yea or nay to the rehearing request, allowing organizations like ours to go to court to challenge a decision, the project is so far gone that by the time you get through to litigation, even if you achieve victory, the project's already in the ground, right? And so it's really a hollow victory. Next slide. Oh, and a perfect example of that was an action that the Delaware Riverkeeper Network brought against the Northeast Upgrade Project, where we actually did achieve victory, and we did get a court decision that found that FERC had violated NEPA in terms of allowing segmentation and failing to review cumulative impacts. But by the time we won that legal victory, the project was in the ground and in operation. The other things we find is that FERC allows projects to go to construction without all necessary permits. They leapfrog over state decision-making. States are required to grant or deny 401 certifications for pipeline projects before FERC is allowed to issue their certificates, but FERC routinely is issuing their certificates first, and that is an absolute clear violation of the language of the law. Next slide. And then just the other thing is FERC does have the ability to fund an Office of Public Participation that was originally designed to help people engage in the FERC process. In this entire 30 years since they've been funded by the industry, FERC has never given one penny towards that office, even though it would constitute a very small portion of their budget. And that's because they don't want to help the public participate, because they're more interested in helping the pipeline companies advance. Next slide. And so, really the question becomes, what can we do about it? Well, there are a number of things that folks are doing about it. There are a number of good things that are happening. One is that hollow victory that I mentioned, where the project was in the ground and in operation by the time we won, did actually set important precedent for other pipeline projects to come. The case was Delaware Riverkeeper Network, New Jersey Sierra Club, New Jersey Highlands Coalition v. FERC. And it came out in 2014. And in that case, the D.C. Court of Appeals found that FERC had impermissibly segmented the project that was put before them and failed to look at cumulative impacts. And we just find this is common practice in FERC. So if you've got a case where you think that there are a whole bunch of pipeline projects that actually form a single project, if you looked at it in total, I recommend that you go back and look at this important case, because it may not have helped us with the Northeast Upgrade Project, but it certainly set important precedent. Next slide. Go forward. We'll just, in the interest of time. We do find, even though we got that legal victory regarding segmentation, we are finding that FERC continues to allow segmentation to happen. And so this is just a picture of the Southeast, the Leidy Southeast line, and you can see it's a single line, but there are a bunch of different colored pieces. Each one of those pieces, according to the pipeline industry and according to FERC, is supposedly a different project. And FERC is reviewing each of them separately and independently. That's a classic case of segmentation that we see happening in front of FERC still today. So if you've got that kind of situation or something close to it, please look at that precedent. Next slide. When it comes to the recent pipeline denial, we did see that FERC looked at the pipeline project and the LNG export facility it was associated with as part of a single decision-making process. So we are forcing some change, but certainly not enough. Next slide. There are other strategies that are going forward. One thing is, again, I mentioned the Delaware Riverkeeper Network recently filed a legal challenge claiming that FERC's funding mechanism and its approval process violates the Fifth Amendment of the federal Constitution because it results in FERC being infected with structural bias, both the appearance of bias and the reality of bias. So that's a case to watch. Next slide. We also have a number of legal challenges being brought by the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, Stop the Pipeline, and other groups, challenging this process whereby FERC is leapfrogging over the states in the decision-making process. So these are cases regarding the Constitution Pipeline, the Leidy Southeast Pipeline, and the Connecticut Expansion Project. You're going to want to keep your eyes on because some important precedents going to be set over the coming months. Next slide. And then the other thing is, if you are not already part of the effort to get an independent investigation by the Government Accountability Office into FERC and FERC's operations, I encourage you to sign on. We have over 240 organizations that have signed on to a letter that we are reaching out to key congressional officials with, urging them to help us get a GAO review into FERC. We believe this will result in very important, enlightening information that will help all of our battles and perhaps help us find a pathway towards reform of this very biased FERC agency. Next slide. And then the other ways to get engaged is we have created a new website called Stop the Pipelines, where we have provided resources for folks who are engaged in pipeline battles, as well as a pathway to help people, communities that find themselves confronted with a pipeline infrastructure project, to get connected with the leaders on that project in their own communities. The website is designed to give everybody credit for all the good work they're doing in these battles. I encourage you to look at that website. If you have a resource you want to get into the hands of the public, I encourage you to send it to me directly or through that website. And if you have a pipeline battle that you want people to know about and you want people to know how to get to you, also give us the information about that battle and who the organizational leaders are with their website links. We'll get you up there. And then just the final thing is that we do have an ongoing and growing regular Google group called Pipeline Protection Google Group. I know the name's kind of ironic. It's, it was a couple of years ago that we set it up. But anyway, we have regular dialogue via email. We have monthly calls. We have really good engagement. And it's a great way to get people connected across pipelines with strategies that benefit all of us. So you don't get on and talk about your particular project and get help with your particular project, except to the extent that you're talking about a strategy that might benefit projects across the nation. So if you want to be joined into that pipeline dialogue, there's my email address. You can send me an email, and I'll get you on that Google group. And I think that's it.
Great. Thank you, Maya, for that. Really quick, I know Maya has something right after this, and so and this is from Mary Beth Raven. The question is, and it's a comment and a question, FERC is not our friend here in New Hampshire. FERC is investigating extraordinarily high transmission costs. So I was hoping they might be our friend in that regard. Any comments on that?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question, the high transmission costs. As far as I understand, FERC is seeking now to allow the pipeline companies to pass on the cost of transmission to communities. So again, it's just another mechanism by which FERC is trying to help the pipeline companies better their bottom line at the expense of our communities.
Okay. Yeah, and Mary Beth, if you want to talk to Maya further, you can follow her on Twitter, and also her email was on this last slide. It's keepermaya@delawareriverkeeper.org. And we'll also follow up with all the registrants on ways that they can communicate with the panelists afterwards. So hopefully that was a little helpful. Robbie, back to you.
Thanks, Prathna. And if you want to ask a question like Mary Beth just did, you can throw it into the chat box or also email us at info@halttheharm.net. Next up is our last speaker, Ellen Taylor. Ellen is a longtime activist and is working predominantly these days with Beyond Extreme Energy, which has been running a direct action campaign against FERC, and is one of the groups that's responsible to this shift in FERC's response to pipelines and approvals that Maya was just talking about.
Yes. Am I on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. Great. First slide. That's the title, but the real slide, yes. So BXE is an alliance of individuals and organizations dedicated to halting, and I love that word, halting, fossil fuel infrastructure. And early on, we decided to focus on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which really has been operating in the shadows. And we intend to drag it out in the light and make a lot of fun of it and do damage in other ways. The origins of BXE was really the folks that were on the climate walk, and there was also a grandparents walk, and those folks planned a successful action at energy resource management offices. And then after that, we kind of said, okay, what next? So we had been talking to some of the people in Cove Point with regard to the FERC permit for their export terminal, and that kind of shifted our attention over to FERC. So next slide. So we got together, and over the summer we planned an action in November, and we decided there was just so much to lay out there that it should be a multi-day action. So here are some shots from that. Next slide. We did a lot of training on nonviolent direct action, did a lot of role playing. We had a whole day, and I think that kind of contributes to the success of our actions, that we really work to make people solid activists with a set of skills that they can use not just at our actions, but other actions as well. Next slide. There you are, shots from the November action. We did a lot of blockades, both soft blockades, and the next slide should be our hard block. I guess not me. There were some edits there. Okay, we also did some hard blockades where they had to kind of, make a big show of bringing in the saws and the equipment. So we gained some skills in terms of those types of blockades as well. We had so much fun and thought that we had so much impact that we decided to do another multi-day action called Stop the FERCus. That's the previous slide, but it wasn't all fun and games. We also did a die-in. We actually used the word communicide, which we think is an accurate description of what FERC is doing to families and communities throughout the country. Next slide. As part of the FERCUS, with the help of Kim Franzik from Sane Energy and some friends of hers, we created a 55-foot banner, which after that action has kind of been touring the country and has been used in a number of actions. Next slide. You can see the banner in the background there as we are obstructing North Capitol Street in Washington, D.C., along with a tripod activist. It was very useful in shutting down streets adjacent to FERC. And it's also very beautiful. Next slide. We kind of threw everything at the wall and a lot of stuff stuck. One of the things that we tried for the first time was a 24-hour occupation in front of FERC for a couple of nights. So we had our little tarp there to keep our gear secure that says FERC destroys communities, and there we are out in front of FERC. Yeah, there were vermin that were of concern for some people, but, a lot of us just kind of stuck it out. Next slide. We did some ancillary actions in the afternoons. This is in front of NPR, National Public Radio. You may not have known that they were taking money from the National Gas Association and really talking up gas as a great fuel, a bridge to the future. So we did bring the banner to NPR and block their entrance. And along with lots of other organizations, NPR was persuaded recently to drop the Gas Association sponsorship. So we call that a win. Next slide. What ended up is that we kind of fell into a pattern where we would do a multi-day action in the spring and then in the fall. So the fall 2015 action was actually a fast, an 18-day fast where a number of people consumed only water, or some people were on a juice fast. But that was scheduled to coincide with the Pope Francis's visit and a celebration of his encyclical. And so you can see that our hashtag no new permits, and that was actually the theme of the fast. No food, no permits. Next slide. And then there are special events. So Valentine's Day. These things come up, and we think that they're a great opportunity. So we did a Valentine's Day delivery project where we actually went to the commissioners' homes in D.C. and then in a few instances, frontline organizations in Arkansas and I think the Northeast were able to deliver Valentines to the real homes of the commissioners. We asked people to actually design their own Valentine to submit to the commissioners, and you can kind of see some of those. People were really very, very creative. Some people were disturbed that we actually published the commissioners' addresses online. We urged people to send their Valentines direct to the commissioners as well as send them to us for posting. But, it's part of the job so far as we see it. So we will be continuing what we call personal touch actions with regard to the commissioners. Next slide. Another kind of special event, Josh Fox was in D.C. for the Environmental Film Festival. His film actually won an award. He had been filming and interviewing the Halloran family. You may have heard that their farm in Pennsylvania was in the route of the Constitution Pipeline, and even though the permits in New York had not been approved, they got a court order to allow them to proceed to cut 90% of the sugar bush on the Halloran farm. So this is a farm, multi-generational farm that primarily supplied maple products. So we decided to take some of the last of the pancake syrup, the maple syrup from the farm, and invite the commissioners down for a pancake breakfast. So we did that in front of FERC. You can see tables, chairs, pancakes. We actually had Tim DeChristopher and Josh making pancakes on a solar-powered griddle. You can see that in the corner. And once again, that's kind of the sort of thing we like to do, a little splashy with a message, but calling out FERC and trying to shame them in a way. Next slide. Before we get to the Rubber Stamp Rebellion, we every month plan a disruption of the FERC public meeting. FERC has to have a public meeting by law. It is open to the public, and we kind of decided that we should just not let them get away with business as usual, and we figure out various means to disrupt the meeting. Lately, we have been encouraging frontline activists to come in and kind of help them stage their action. In March, come down with regard to their fight against the Spectra AIM pipeline. So we're looking for groups who would be willing to send a few representatives down to D.C. And do the disruption. We also can maybe find proxies if you can't manage to get people here. We can disrupt in your name. Then, as I said, we kind of fell into a pattern of doing spring and fall actions, multi-day actions. So we are planning a Rubber Stamp Rebellion May 15th through 22nd. Here in D.C. And once again, that will be a multi-day action. We'll be doing a lot of actions at FERC, other FERC targets as well, and we are encouraging frontline communities to find other targets that might be good in the D.C. area that we can branch out and do some rebelling. So that's what we've been doing, kind of how we've been doing it. We are asking people to register for the Rubber Stamp Rebellion, so you can go to our website, beyondextremeenergy.org, and register for that. We'll be having a training May 15th. As I said, we're kind of big into building community and skills, and we'd urge you to come down for that. And the other thing that you can do to kind of keep up with us is we have a BX Ely weekly news email, and you can sign up for that, and that actually tells you what planning calls are going on. It gives you like things that you might read to educate yourself on the FERC issues, and events that people have given us to publicize. So that's basically it. We have a lot of fun, and we think we're having some impact. I know Norman Bay, is really frustrated. So we're just kind of keeping on and then upping the ante every time.
Great. Thank you so much, Ellen, and thank you again to all of our speakers. Now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion. I do realize that it is 7 o'clock and we have run a little bit over time. However, I do know that a few of our panelists might have to step off, but